How many times have you bitten your tongue when you should have spoken? How often have you smiled politely while someone disrespected you? How frequently have you told yourself it's not worth the argument when your soul was screaming for justice? Let me tell you something that will sting. Every time you choose false peace over authentic conflict, you choose slavery over freedom. We've been conditioned to believe that avoiding confrontation makes us civilized, that swallowing our truth makes us mature, that keeping quiet in the face of injustice makes us noble. This is perhaps the greatest lie ever sold to humanity. Nietzsche saw through this deception with laser precision. He understood that what we call politeness is often cowardice, what we label wisdom is frequently fear, and what we praise as keeping the peace is actually surrendering our power to those who have no qualms about taking it. You've been taught that conflict is ugly, that disagreement is immature, that standing your ground is selfish. But I'm here to tell you that the opposite is true. Your refusal to engage in necessary conflict is what keeps you weak, dependent, and spiritually dead. This isn't about becoming aggressive or picking fights for sport. This is about recognizing that conflict is the forge where authentic character is shaped, where real strength is born, where genuine freedom is won. Nietzsche called those who avoid conflict at all costs the last men, being so domesticated, so neutered by their own fear that they can no longer recognize what they've lost. They mistake their paralysis for virtue, their cowardice for compassion, their servitude for sophistication. But you don't have to be one of them. You don't have to live your life tiptoeing around other people's emotions while your own truth suffocates inside you. You don't have to smile while you're being diminished, nod while you're being manipulated, or stay silent while you're being disrespected. Freedom requires conflict. Authenticity demands confrontation. Self-respect necessitates the willingness to disturb the peace when that peace is built on your submission. In this video, we're going to explore why your fear of conflict is actually fear of your own power, why the world benefits from your silence, and how Nietzsche's philosophy can teach you to reclaim the warrior spirit that's been beaten out of you by a society that profits from your compliance. Are you ready to stop being afraid of your own strength? Then let's begin this uncomfortable but necessary journey. The domestication of the human spirit. To understand why you fear conflict so deeply, we must examine what Nietzsche called the domestication of man, the systematic process by which natural human strength has been bred out of us, like aggression being bred out of wolves to create lapdogs. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche observed that civilization hasn't just organized human society, it has fundamentally altered human nature itself. What was once wild, untamed, and authentically powerful has been systematically weakened through generations of conditioning. From your earliest memories, you were trained to suppress your natural responses to injustice. When someone took your toy, you were told to share. When someone hit you, you were taught to turn the other cheek. When someone insulted you, you were instructed to be the bigger person. Each of these lessons, while appearing virtuous on the surface, was actually training you to ignore your instincts, to suppress your natural responses, to become docile in the face of aggression. You were being domesticated. The educational system completed this process. Sit still. Don't question authority. Follow instructions. Conform to the group. Any display of what Nietzsche called natural nobility, the instinct to assert yourself, to challenge unfairness, to refuse submission, was labeled as disruptive, problematic, or antisocial. By the time you reached adulthood, this conditioning was so complete that you began to police yourself. You no longer needed external authority to suppress your natural responses. You did it automatically, reflexively, unconsciously. Nietzsche saw this as a tragedy of cosmic proportions. He watched humanity voluntarily weakening itself, choosing comfort over strength, security over authenticity, social approval over individual power. He called this process nihilism, not just the absence of values, but the active embrace of weakness as virtue. The result is what you see around you today. A world full of people who are technically free, but psychologically enslaved, legally empowered, but spiritually powerless, socially connected, but existentially isolated. You've been taught to see strength as dangerous, assertion as aggression, and boundary setting as selfishness. You've internalized the belief that your natural responses to mistreatment are somehow wrong, that your instinct to fight back is primitive, that your desire for respect is ego. But Nietzsche understood that this domestication serves a purpose, just not your purpose. It serves those who benefit from your compliance, your silence, your willingness to absorb disrespect without retaliation. Your weakness is their strength. Your submission is their power. The question is, how long will you continue to participate in your own diminishment? The slave mentality and its modern manifestations. Now we come to one of Nietzsche's most penetrating insights, the psychology of the slave mentality and how it manifests in your daily life. On the Genealogy of Morals, he revealed how those who cannot assert power directly learn to manipulate through weakness, how those who cannot win through strength learn to control through guilt. The slave mentality doesn't just accept oppression, it transforms oppression into virtue. It takes the experience of being powerless and reframes it as moral superiority. I don't fight back because I'm evolved. I don't assert myself because I'm enlightened. I don't set boundaries because I'm compassionate. But Nietzsche saw through this psychological sleight of hand. He recognized that what appears to be virtue is often just fear wearing a disguise, that what seems like wisdom is frequently just weakness seeking justification. You see this slave mentality everywhere in modern life. It's the person who says, "I don't like drama," while allowing themselves to be consistently mistreated. It's the individual who prides themselves on being easygoing, while never advocating for their own needs. It's the one who claims to be above conflict, while their resentment slowly poisons their soul. The slave mentality has learned to weaponize its own powerlessness. It uses guilt to control others. How could you be so aggressive? It uses shame as a shield. I would never behave that way. It transforms its inability to assert itself into a judgment against those who can. This mentality has become so pervasive that it's now considered the mark of sophistication. The person who refuses to engage in conflict is seen as mature. The individual who avoids confrontation is viewed as wise. The one who never asserts themselves is praised as selfless. But Nietzsche understood that this apparent virtue comes at a devastating cost. When you consistently choose to avoid necessary conflict, you don't just fail to solve external problems, you create internal ones. The anger doesn't disappear, it turns inward. The frustration doesn't vanish, it becomes resentment. The injustice doesn't end, it multiplies. You begin to live a divided life, outwardly compliant but inwardly furious, publicly agreeable but privately bitter, socially harmonious but personally fragmented. This internal split is what Nietzsche called the bad conscience, the result of turning your natural aggressive instincts against yourself. The slave mentality tells you that this internal suffering is noble, that this self-suppression is virtuous, that this psychological self-harm is evidence of your moral evolution. But it's actually evidence of your spiritual suicide, the will to power and authentic assertion. The antidote to slave mentality lies in what Nietzsche called the will to power, perhaps his most misunderstood concept. This isn't about dominating others, it's about refusing to be dominated. It's not about oppressing, it's about not being oppressed. It's not about becoming a tyrant, it's about ceasing to be a victim. The will to power is the fundamental life force that drives all existence toward growth, expansion, and self-actualization. It's what makes the flower push through concrete, what drives the artist to create despite criticism, what compels the truth-teller to speak despite consequences. In human beings, the will to power manifests as the drive to become who you truly are, to express your authentic nature, to claim your space in the world without apology. It's the force that says, "I exist, I matter, and I will not be diminished." But this force has been systematically suppressed in you through years of conditioning. You've been taught that asserting yourself is selfish, that claiming your power is aggressive, that refusing to be mistreated is antisocial. Reclaiming your will to power means recognizing that you have not just the right, but the responsibility to defend your dignity, to protect your boundaries, to insist on respectful treatment. It means understanding that conflict isn't always destructive. It's often creative, clarifying, and necessary. When you exercise your will to power authentically, you're not trying to diminish others. You're refusing to diminish yourself. You're not seeking to harm. You're seeking to heal the split between your internal truth and external expression. You're not being selfish. You're being self-full, complete, integrated. This requires developing what Nietzsche called hardness, not cruelty toward others, but firmness toward yourself. The hardness to say no when you mean no. The hardness to speak truth when it's uncomfortable. The hardness to maintain your standards, even when others pressure you to lower them. It means becoming what he called a free spirit, someone who has broken free from the psychological chains of social conditioning, who thinks for themselves, who values their own judgment over popular opinion, who would rather be authentic and alone than false and accepted. The will to power isn't about becoming perfect or invulnerable. It's about becoming real, about aligning your external behavior with your internal truth, about refusing to live a life of psychological contradictions. When you stop being afraid of conflict, you stop being afraid of your own power. When you stop avoiding confrontation, you stop avoiding yourself. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. The Übermensch, beyond victim and victimizer. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, often mistranslated as Superman, represents the highest evolution of human consciousness. A being who has transcended both the need to dominate and the willingness to be dominated. This isn't about becoming superhuman, it's about becoming fully human. The Übermensch is neither victim nor victimizer, but something beyond this primitive duality. They don't avoid conflict out of fear, nor do they seek it out of aggression. They engage with life's challenges from a place of strength, clarity, and authentic power. Most people oscillate between these two poles, sometimes playing the victim, avoiding conflict, seeking sympathy, blaming others, sometimes playing the victimizer, using aggression to mask insecurity, dominating to avoid being dominated. But both positions are forms of weakness disguised as strategy. The victim position seems safer because it avoids immediate confrontation, but it comes at the cost of personal power and self-respect. The victimizer position seems stronger because it appears to control outcomes, but it's actually driven by fear and ultimately alienates others. The Übermensch transcends this dynamic entirely. They don't need to avoid conflict because they're not afraid of it. They don't need to dominate others because they've learned to master themselves. They don't seek approval because they've developed the capacity to approve of themselves. This evolution requires what Nietzsche called self-overcoming, the ability to rise above your conditioned responses, to act from choice rather than compulsion, to create your own values rather than inheriting them from others. In practical terms, this means developing the ability to engage in conflict without being consumed by it, to assert yourself without needing to diminish others, to stand firm without becoming rigid, to be strong without being cruel. The Übermensch approaches conflict as a craftsman approaches their work, with skill, intention, and artistry. They understand that conflict can be destructive or creative, depending on how it's wielded. They've learned to use it as a tool for clarity, growth, and authentic connection, rather than as a weapon for dominance or defense. This doesn't mean they're always gentle or always harsh. It means they're always authentic, always responding from their truth rather than their conditioning, always acting from strength rather than weakness. The Übermensch has what Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate. They embrace the totality of existence, including its conflicts, challenges, and difficulties. They don't try to escape the human condition. They learn to dance with it. When you develop this perspective, conflict becomes less threatening because you're no longer attached to controlling outcomes. You can speak your truth without needing others to accept it. You can set boundaries without needing others to like them. You can assert yourself without needing others to approve. Creating your own values through conflict. One of Nietzsche's most radical insights was that all values are human creations, not divine commandments or natural laws. This means you have not just the ability, but the responsibility to create your own moral framework. And conflict is often where this creation happens. Every time you face a situation that requires you to choose between comfort and truth, between social approval and authenticity, between peace and justice, you're being given an opportunity to clarify and strengthen your values. But this only happens if you're willing to engage with the conflict rather than avoid it. When you consistently avoid confrontation, you never really discover what you stand for because you're never forced to stand for anything. Your values remain theoretical, untested, weak. It's only when they're challenged that they become real, strong, unshakable. Nietzsche understood that this process of value creation through conflict is how individuals become individuals rather than just members of the herd. The herd follows pre-existing rules, external authorities, social expectations. The individual creates their own path based on their own experience and their own truth. This requires what he called intellectual honesty, the courage to examine your beliefs without the comfort of predetermined answers, to question your assumptions without the safety net of social approval, to think for yourself even when it leads to uncomfortable conclusions. Most people avoid this process because it's easier to follow existing rules than to create new ones, easier to conform to expectations than to forge your own path, easier to avoid conflict than to use it for growth. But this easier path leads to a life of spiritual poverty, emotional numbness, and existential emptiness. Creating your own values through conflict means being willing to disappoint others in service of your truth, to be misunderstood in service of your authenticity, to be disliked in service of your integrity. It means choosing the harder path that leads to genuine freedom rather than the easier path that leads to comfortable slavery. This doesn't mean becoming arbitrary or narcissistic in your values. It means developing them through rigorous self-examination, honest confrontation with reality, and authentic engagement with life's challenges. Your values become strong, not because you inherited them from others, but because you forged them in the fire of your own experience. When you create your own values this way, they become unshakable because they're truly yours. No one can take them from you because no one gave them to you. No external authority can invalidate them because they don't depend on external validation. This is true freedom, not the absence of conflict, but the ability to navigate conflict from your own center according to your own values, in service of your own truth. The price of peace and the reward of conflict. We've reached the end of this exploration, but perhaps this is where your real journey begins. Throughout this video, you've been confronted with the truth that our culture desperately wants to hide. that your fear of conflict is keeping you enslaved. You've seen how the domestication process has bred the natural strength out of you, how slave mentality has taught you to transform weakness into virtue, how the will to power offers a path back to authentic strength, and how the Übermensch represents the possibility of transcending both victim and victimizer dynamics. But understanding these concepts intellectually is not enough. Knowledge without application is just entertainment. The real question is, what will you do with this understanding? Every day you face moments where you can choose conflict or avoidance, truth or comfort, authenticity or approval. These moments may seem small, a conversation where you could speak up, a boundary you could set, a truth you could tell. But these small moments accumulate into the larger pattern of your life. Nietzsche knew that most people would choose the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable truth, the easy submission over the difficult assertion, the false peace over the authentic conflict. He called them the last men, being so thoroughly domesticated that they could no longer imagine what they had lost. But you don't have to be one of them. You can choose to reclaim your power, to develop your strength, to create your own values through conscious engagement with life's challenges. You can choose to become an individual rather than just a member of the herd. This choice comes with a price. You will disappoint people who are invested in your compliance. You will disturb relationships that depend on your submission. You will lose the comfortable illusion that everyone will like you if you just remain harmless enough. But you will gain something infinitely more valuable: yourself, your authentic voice, your genuine power, your real freedom. You will discover that the strength you were afraid to claim was always there, waiting for you to stop being afraid of it. The world needs people who are willing to engage in necessary conflict, who are strong enough to speak difficult truths, who care more about justice than comfort, more about authenticity than approval. The world needs you to stop being afraid of your own power. So I challenge you. The next time you face a situation that calls for conflict, don't automatically retreat into your conditioned response of avoidance. Pause. Ask yourself, what would courage look like here? What would authenticity demand? What would my strongest, truest self do? Then do that, even if your hands shake, even if your voice trembles, even if others disapprove. Each time you choose strength over weakness, truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, you take a step toward the person you were always meant to be. If this video has stirred something in you, if it has awakened a recognition of your own suppressed strength, I want you to write in the comments, "I choose courage over comfort." Make this declaration not just to me, but to yourself, and to the part of you that has been waiting for permission to be powerful. And don't stop here. The next video will take you even deeper into this transformation. This journey toward authentic strength and genuine freedom has only just begun. You were not born to be harmless. You were born to be real. It's time to stop apologizing for your existence and start celebrating your power.